All right, today we're going to dive into a report from Cannabis and Tech Today about what investors are looking for, 10 tips for success. A lot of things moving, a lot of things going to be different. And so want to keep on top of what the industry is doing and what businesses can do to stay successful. Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, capital markets analyst and host of your cannabis business podcast. Back with us is Katrina Glogowski, angel investor and attorney, to talk about an article from originally from Cannabis and Tech Today. Katrina, thanks for being back on the podcast.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, so we found the article via Benzinga. They reprinted this Cannabis and Tech Today article about the 10 areas that businesses can do to keep on top of things. Number one is to have a smooth running operation. Cannabis companies experience a rapid growth can end up sputtering if they lose sight of what's happening and they can't predict what's likely to happen or make hiring mishaps. So can your financial systems keep up with the growth that you're trying to make sense of things from multiple spreadsheets, or the right employees in the right position? Or do some people lack the skills and experience they need to do their jobs effectively? Smart investors are going to be asking those types of questions.
Absolutely, Josh. We've talked about the importance of SOPs, and SOPs can help you handle the growth, having a growth plan, a development plan. But most importantly, you got to have the staff. And you could argue who's more important to a cannabis operation, compliance or finance. But I think that your first significant hire and most important hire is finance.
Absolutely. If you get a ton of money and you don't know what to do with it, if you don't have anybody to hold you financially accountable, staying in compliance is really important. But having somebody that has the right skill set for finance, I think, is important. Obviously, I'm biased against that as a capital markets analyst, but it goes back to our 7 tips to a successful investment deck. Is this, number one, you identify the business plan goals and staying true to that and having the vision for that. And also number 4, which is needs and roadblocks. So understanding that there's going to be things constantly in your way, but having the right team and products, I think, is number 6 on the list for the 7 tips to a successful investment deck. And that kind of translates into how to remain successful overall. So if you're not focused, if you don't have and understand that things do change, we've talked a lot of trash about Tilray, not really understanding if Brandon Kennedy, who's running Tilray, doesn't smoke cannabis, doesn't use cannabis, and is proud of that, how are you going to keep sight of what's happening? How are you going to predict what's likely to happen? And how are you going to avoid writing off billions of dollars that your competitors at Aurora and Canopy have?
Right.
All of these things kind of just line up on how you should be successful. I'm loving the volatility on Tilray, though. I might be playing that on the upswing and downswing, but this is not financial advice, so don't listen to me. All boils down to accurate information. So investors want to see that the company has access to real, reliable data that they can use to inform decision-making. That means having regularly prepared financial statements in addition to relevant data points on key metrics, like should a dispensary know how long it takes for a product to sell? And farmers should know yielding per plant. So especially during late harvest season right now, suppliers should know when the percentage of the revenues that comes from each customer, who their biggest customer is, and how that data is viewed and analyzed. All of the things that kind of we cover with our headset reports, BDS analytics, and New Frontier data, and Happy Monkey, all of the data reports that we get is helping our clients kind of figure out, with that accurate information, what to do with it.
This is imperative, and it's the appropriate staff, having compliance procedures, having finance procedures. So somebody might steal $10,000 from the kitty, but you catch it before they steal $1 million from the kitty. But also you can't do projections without the data. Hey, we want to add a new product line. Okay. How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take to recoup those costs? And you and I talk all the time, Josh, about cost of goods sold. If you don't know how much it costs to make something, you don't know how to charge for it. And if you don't know how to charge for it, how can you determine what's profitable?
That's right. Especially with shipping costs, a lot of CBD companies think that it's great that they can cross borders, but they can't really afford to ship products effectively or inexpensively. So not only are you trying to figure out which flavor profiles to sell and which zip code, getting that granular data is important, but how to really figure out what you should be selling and what you're spending too much time on. We even saw that in the real world with Coca-Cola really paring down on which items it was going to sell and which ones it was no longer going to. And so as soon as we normalize this industry, we're going to see a lot more of that. So it's about finding the right key players and having those individuals looking at the data that's available and optimizing what's being sold and where and how. And again, staying relevant to data points on key metrics is important. Otherwise, how are you going to know that you're succeeding?
Agreed.
So number 3 is understanding the true cost of things. Like you mentioned, cost of goods sold. This is where conversation with potential investors can fall off the rails. So they want to know not only what goes into each product you sell, but that you actually know the information and you can knowledgeably talk about your margins. So if you factored in marketing and cost sales, how much of a drain do slow moving products have on your storage expenses? We don't have drop shipping, right? So it's important to make sure that you're not having something that exceeds the shelf life. You don't want, if you're mixing in oil and water, you don't want that separating. That's if you're in a medical state and you still don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things you want to take a look at, and understanding the cost and time frames are important.
And it's much more than just the product. What's the rent? Uh, let's not forget taxes. We see cannabis businesses, woohoo, I have $1 million in the bank account. And that is absolutely wonderful. And we want people to have $1 million in their bank account, assuming they have a bank account. That's a good sign. But that doesn't mean you made $1 million worth of profit. So yeah, you have to take every single cost into account, rent, advertising, electricity, everything.
Mm-hmm. And build some accountability into that, right? If you hire somebody, you have to hold them accountable. That's number 4. So build in accountability. There's no way around it. The industry is under heavy scrutiny from all angles, making accountability a top priority. So by adopting a culture that values taking a disciplined approach to the business, including finances, you can confidently stand by the projections you share with your investors. So budgets and forecasts, they can carefully create and then test out over time. Employees should have key metrics and targets to aim for and be held accountable to the results.
This is a compliance program, Josh. Check and double check. Um, and if people are not performing, get rid of them. And this includes finance. This includes legal. This includes management, sales. It doesn't matter. Stop the bleeding before you start hemorrhaging.
Yeah, I definitely think that this is something that the industry is severely lacking, is accountability and scrutiny, compliance and finance professionals. So I think that maybe the next wave we'll see more accountability, and that'll be on the back of professionals holding people accountable. Just haven't seen it yet. Not widely throughout the industry. They've been severely lacking in accountability.
Yeah, agreed.
So number 5 is to make a clear view of the cash. With many companies accustomed to bank denials and dealing with large amounts of cash, the industry faces a special challenge. Cash could be sparked in multiple locations, making it difficult to know how much you have at any one time. Investors want to confirm that you could pay your bills and to know how you'll do it. So typical question you may hear is, what kind of payment terms have you established with suppliers, and can you meet them?
We don't see too much of this in Washington state, Josh, because there's no credit. There's no COD type stuff. The track and trace system in Washington effectively requires payment on delivery in all circumstances. But that doesn't mean your employees are paid on delivery, right? Your employees are paid bi-weekly, most likely, and your other vendors For example, in Seattle, you pay your light bill every 2 months. So you have to have these numbers under control. You have to understand these numbers, and you have to have an understanding of how you're going to pay those bills. So you're not running around fire sale on Friday at 9 a.m. to make payroll at noon.
And make sure you're paying your taxes, because that's not
Yeah.
something that you're going to be able to get out from. And all too often we see businesses that won't pay taxes on employee tax or property tax or whatever it is. You can't just decide not to pay that. They will come after you, and you can't write that off in bankruptcy. So,
Josh, the most important thing that you said in that sentence was they will come after you, not your company, you. The taxes do not ever go away. And you correctly stated bankruptcy is not an option. And even if bankruptcy was an option, you can't get rid of tax in bankruptcy. So if I'm running a cannabis business, the very first thing I do is pay tax.
yeah. And once the industry is normalized, when you get net 30 options at 10, like a net 1030, you can get 10% off on if it's paid for within 30 days. Banks will start coming out of the woodworks and offering opportunities to reduce your expenses on that, because when you annualize those terms, it gets really, really expensive. And so, like you mentioned, we don't really have this yet because we don't have debt options. Everything is cash. But when it is normalized and you will have, net 30 options, you want to take a look at that and save yourself some cash. But that's going to be down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6 is going to be trustworthiness. Investors want to know that they can believe in the information you're telling them. Do you have controls around the financial information and how it's recorded, or does everyone follow their own process? So the way the information is gathered, the systems there are in place to monitor and track and record it. Timely information, make sure it's accurate, and can significantly affect how hopeful investors will be about your business. So yeah, trustworthiness, right? That's investors' number one thing, is they're investing in the individuals more so than maybe the product itself. And if you have red flags, that trustworthiness goes right out the door.
This element gets right to SOPs. Pardon me. This element gets right to the SOPs and compliance and finance professionals and legal professionals on your team. You can be the best grower of cannabis, and you can be growing the best strain in the entire world. You're not going to get $1 of investor money if you don't have a team behind you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people that have some respect in the industry, and they're not, BS artists and all of that. So definitely want to have trustworthiness behind you, as well as comparability and predictability. That is number 7. Are you able to pinpoint any patterns that may show up from a week or 2 weeks or a quarter to quarter? Information gives investors an idea of what they can expect from the business and whether that fits into their goals. And they'll be curious to know whether you can accurately project future results. So this also goes down to business development as well as finance, to make sure that your pro forma statements, your future looking financial statements, are on point and not some random $420 million projection that you decided to come up with after a bong hit. You're making sure that you have comparable, and predictable results is key.
Josh, we address this in our competition slide, and we want to know that you understand the market. Who are you up against? Competition can give us information about, oh, hey, there's 10 different vape pens on the market. But the fact that you put the time and effort into researching those 10 companies that are making vape pens also helps educate you and the investor about the market as a whole. And if you stay on top of monitoring your competitors, you will be able to identify the trends, hopefully before everybody else, but certainly realize possible obstacles and possible opportunities. If you find out one of your major competitors is having financial problems, or all of a sudden their sales dipped for no reason, then you got to start asking yourself why. And same thing, if your competitor's sales exponentially jumped without a specific reason, you also have to ask yourself why. And so this is probably in the top 5 most important things that you need to do as a cannabis entrepreneur is understand the marketplace, understand your competition.
Yes. And that kind of goes into number 8 about future plans. Again, you have to kind of be aware of the culture, because if you don't know, if you came in from Silicon Valley or tobacco or the pharmaceutical industry, and you don't know cannabis, that you think it's just another commodity or crop or you know whatever, you're not going to really get that accurate. And we can see that in the $1 to $3 billion write-off that we saw with Aurora and Canopy. So number 8 on the list is future plans. Be ready to talk about where the market and where your company are headed. Investors are going to be interested in understanding your insights about consumer behavior, potential expansion, and the possibility that you have an exit strategy. And even if it's way off, they may want to know that you've gone through enough scenarios that you have the ability to come up with that realistic plan, and that you've decided which routes are worth contemplating or pursuing. Hard to do that when you don't really understand the industry.
Yeah, I agree with number 8 wholeheartedly.
Number 9 is have a clean financial statement. Don't see that too often in the cannabis industry. You need to anticipate being asked for audited financial statements and know that getting these together can take up more time than you might expect. And so if you haven't established a habit of regularly closing the books, a drawn out process of looking back over the past couple of years is a must do, and it's a common struggle. So start with getting the financial household in order so you know where a company stands before deciding how to reach out to investors. I think the last thing people want is to be handed a shoebox filled with like receipts and not a spreadsheet that's detail oriented, that can really kind of give you a clean financial statement.
This cannot be overstated. And I stated earlier, your first hire should be finance because of exactly this problem. If you have to go back in time and fix this stuff, it is a pain in the patootie, and it is very expensive. It is not pleasant. It is not fun. And this is more than just a box of receipts. If you can't account for every dollar in that company, you have a problem. And if you are just simple task of you're the owner of the company and you're taking some equity out of the company. Okay, great, wonderful. Like you're working for equity. It's very common in startups. Make sure you're tracking how you are awarded that equity and what you did for that equity, because cleaning up the corporate books can be even worse. Uh, Josh, you need to have a financial person on your team very, very early in the process. And I think 8 or 9 of these first 9 tips address finance in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. And transparency should as well. That's the 10th one. So the investor relationship, it's not going to end once you get the funding. Your investors are going to want to know where the money is going and what the expected results or updates. So that means going up with how you'll keep them informed and assuring that your company will operate with integrity. So it comes back with trustworthiness and being transparent and open and honest. And that includes financials.
I was working with a company here in sunny Seattle, and they wanted some investment dollars from me, and I knew them. I'd been to their facility, I inspected everything, and I was ready to write a check. And I met with another investor who was also ready to write a check. And during that meeting, there was an offhand little comment about the litigation. And I knew these people, I knew this company, and I had done my due diligence. I looked it up, and now litigation. And I'm like, what?
Mm.
What? How come I'm hearing about litigation when I basically have my checkbook in my hand? Now, was that a failure on my due diligence part? You could argue that. But they didn't tell me about this litigation. And then I come to find out the litigation is significant There was patent litigation going on. There was litigation between the founders going on. And I immediately put my checkbook down, walked out the door because of this exact problem. They might be able to get out of the litigation. Maybe it's not a big deal, but they didn't tell me, Josh.
Yeah.
It certainly wasn't on their books either.
That's definitely not being transparent. So all in all, not a bad list here for cannabis investors needing 10 tips for success. Just kind of going through it. You need to have running operations that are smooth, accurate information, true understanding of costs, built-in accountability, a clear view of the cash, trustworthiness, comparability and predictability, future plans, clean financial statements, and transparency. So yeah, a lot of finance involved with that. So maybe it's a sign of the times. Maybe we are maturing. You're just gonna have to come back to the talking hedge and find out. I want to thank my guest, Katrina Glogowski, angel investor and attorney. Thanks for running through this Cannabis Investors 10 Tips for Success.
Thanks, Josh.
With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is The Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.